Hello and welcome to another brand new episode and the premiere episode of CPOV Autographs. I'm so excited for Autographs to be joining CertainPOV.com, where you will now be able to find this podcast. I'm really excited. If you're hearing it, then everything went through fine and the feed is A-OK. The goal was to keep it so you didn't have to resubscribe to the podcast on a new platform. It should just transition on the back end, and you shouldn't have anything to worry about. So if you're hearing this, everything went swimmingly. Before we get to this week's episode, of course, I do, as always, want to thank my patrons, Greg, Case, Emily, Rob, Frankie, and Robert. Thank you so much for helping me improve and make this podcast what it is today and in the future. I appreciate you all so much, as well as all of the Patreons at any level. If you'd like to join my Patreon, you can go to patreon.com/Stormageddon, or you can go to www.djstormageddon.com to find everything that I do. Enough about that. Enough about what's changing, what's new. Let's talk about this episode. I have the incredible Hans Martin Jr., your Real Movie Critic, as he likes to put it. I adore this human. He is so great and so fun and so kind. I've been a guest on his podcast many a time through the years. He is a part of the Certain POV podcast family, and I'm really excited to share this conversation we had. We talk about movies, we talk about the origins of his shows, the origin of his writing reviews and falling in love with movies. It's really a great conversation. So without further ado, let's get into my incredible chat with the awesome Hans Martin Jr. For those tuning in, I am talking with the incredible Hans Martin Jr., the incredible Real Movie Critic. I like interviewing people who want to be interviewed, and we've known each other a while, and you've been a fan of the show, which I'm super grateful for. But I like when folks approach me about coming on the show because it requires the least amount of setup, pitch, or rigmarole because you know what the deal is. So that's always exciting.
Yeah, no, for sure. Yeah, thanks for having me, and yeah, it's a pleasure. And I think this show is very unique. I love how you interview and everything. So, yeah, no, I'm happy to be here.
Well, thank you. For those who don't know, Hans is my brethren in arms over at Certain POV. By the time this airs, if all has gone right, which with the internet, who knows, this podcast is now Certain POV Autographs and is on the network. It was the last holdout of all my shows. And I'm really excited for this to be the debut episode because Hans is a really good dude who I've known for a while. And the first thing I wanted to talk to you about, Hans, is actually the origins of Real Movie Critic versus Cine-Guy, because it wasn't always that. It started as Real Movie News and Reviews. It was you and Addie Thomas, one of the founders of the network. And so I'm curious how that podcast got started. Tell me a little bit about what the origins of the show is.
Oh, man. All right. So we got to go way back. I would say like maybe 2014, where everything gets started, when I started as a blogger. And it's funny because I always enjoyed film. And always on my Facebook, yes, call me a boomer, I don't care. But back in Facebook, I used to put like brief, like quick quips of the movies that I have seen, and people actually were starting to like it. And they're like, "Hey, man, you should start a blog or something." And I was like, you know what? Maybe you're right. And mind you that in college, I did take a couple classes in journalism, so I kind of knew how to go into that. But I was in journalism for sports at first. I never thought I would go in for movies, really. But, it's crazy how things happen. And, of course, my main profession does involve sports, being a physical education teacher and all that. So... But, so I started a blog, and I still have this blog. It's on WordPress, which you could find at realmoviecritic.com. Already an early plug. But and so I got that started, and about a year, maybe a year and a half in, Addie Thomas comes in and messages me. And, I knew Addie from college. Mm-hmm. We both went to the same college. And it's funny, though. Even though we went to the same college, it's not like we really talked to each other that much.
Right.
But we kind of knew each other. Mm-hmm. Because, as I said, I was studying journalism. in college, and he was studying something with communications or film. I can't remember. And he was actually working at the radio station on campus as well.
Right.
And so it was always like an acquaintance. But then after the blog, he hits me up. This is when he was just starting his podcast with Certain Point of View. That's what it was called back then. And he also had a sports podcast as well at that time. And yeah, he was telling me, hey, I think you'd be good if you got on the show. I really enjoyed reading your blogs. I think you have some good potential. And one thing that Adi has always told me since even today, he says that I am dedicated in what I'm doing. And so, yeah, and he says that's the main feature that you need to really do something, anything, is you need dedication. You need to keep at it no matter what. And so, in one of the early episodes of his show, Certain Point of View, he did invite me to come to the show. And we did an episode where we did our top 5 favorite action scenes in comic book movies. And I had a blast. That was the first time I ever did podcasting. And it was fun. I had a blast. We talked, we laughed, everything. And afterwards, I was telling Adi, I really enjoy doing this. I really would like to do more if I'm in town. He lives in D.C. And at the time I was in Boston, living there. And yeah, it just flourished. It started progressing. I started being more episodes of Certain Point of View for many different things. And it's always been fun. And so finally, Adi says, hey, let's get a podcast started. And I was like, let's do it. And even before that, I did have a YouTube video series as well. And actually, it was Adi that gave me the name, The Real Movie Critic, because I didn't know what name to go by. And the reason he said you should be called The Real Movie Critic, because he says that your reviews are not like any other critic, You are, and actually my tagline is Real Movie Reviews for Ordinary People.
Yeah.
And that's what it is. He's like, you give a good take for the regular people, Let's face it, some critics are more like English majors and stuff like that, which they put it on a little higher pedestal. But I go for like what people like, Mm-hmm. And of course, when you put in that tier, it's like the Star Wars, the Marvel movies, Lord of the Rings, whatever. I was one of the fans of those that really know what I'm talking about when I do those type of reviews. And I think that's one of the biggest catch. And I love those type of films. Those are my favorites out of everything. Even though I watch practically everything, but those are like my main things. And so with that, and he just continues showing me the dedication with the YouTube videos. We started a podcast. We started with Real Movie News and Reviews. Adi did tell me that it was best that if we get this started as a host. And even with Adi coming in, it was always something temporary just to get my both feet planted on this.
Right.
And it's always been, from the beginning. But I really enjoyed it. At that time, that show was very different than what we have now.
For sure.
And the reason is, I think with me and Adi, we're definitely more like, how can I say this? Like, not sophisticated, but it's actually like a conversation like you have normal with other people.
Right.
And, and that could be a good thing or a bad thing, depends on who's listening. But really, podcast is all about conversations.
For sure.
And that's how I felt relaxed, and we're just talking, And so, yeah, that got going, and we're doing pretty good. We're being consistent week by week. Of course, I was the guy that really watches the films, Adi sometimes, because he's a busy guy,
Yeah.
And so, but he did most of the editing. I know, of course, I didn't know anything what to do about editing and stuff like that. And so eventually, Adi was telling me, all right, we got to see if we could do something else, without him. He'd still be in the line producing, helping us, but probably can't do the show week by week. And I was thinking to myself, oh, man, what am I going to do? It's going to be hard to find people to watch movies every week,
right.
Or that's going to be hard. And so I was thinking to myself, it's like, how am I going to do this? It's going to be weird if it's just me talking to myself. That's not a podcast. That's just, I don't know what it is. And then next thing you know, I was, one of my good friends back in Boston, Stephen Angulo. He was at his tail end of graduating from college, and he was actually starting his own blog, reviewing films as well, calling himself the Cine-Guy. And I knew Stephen since he was very young. He was always the type of guy that really enjoys film.
I love that you said you knew him when he was very young. The boy is... He looks like he's 12. I know he's older than that, but like he's still very young. Let's be real. He's still very young. And I love Steven, yes. But he's still very young.
Yes. He even acts young as well. But yes.
That is true.
But yeah, but yes, I knew him from a very young age. And, I was telling Adi, hey, why don't we get him on the show and see how he does? And Adi was like, yeah, sure. And then so we tried him out, and he was pretty good, even though the thing about Steven, too, is when he's not the main man, he tends to be quiet and says what he needs to say.
Right.
But you knew the potential was there, and so, and I always tell Steven, he's like, yo, you got potential, just do it, but when he's really on his own realm, that's where you can see how he flourishes when he does his Cine-Guy reviews, which he still does to this day.
Yep. And then I was telling Adi, okay, what do you think about him? And Adi's like, you know what? The main, and kind of like what Adi said about me, I said about Steven, is like, he's dedicated. He likes to watch film a lot as well. And he is, somebody that might be willing to do this. And so when I talked to Steven, I asked him, hey, would you be interested in joining our show? He didn't even hesitate. He's like, yes, let's do it. And, oh, man, so eventually, Adi kind of passed the reins to Steven. We were still Real Movie News and Reviews for a little bit. As Steven, we decided to make Steven a host because we knew he had that in him. Right.
And so he's starting to get used to it. He's starting to flourish. And then eventually I was like, it's too much of my name on this. What do we, what can we come up to what can we do to try to revamp the show just a little bit? And, and as I said, Adi was still there as a producer as we talked to him. He's like, why don't we make it something like the Real Movie Critic versus the Cine-Guy? Kind of like make it like a versus thing where even though sometimes our opinions are not always different, but, little things here and there where we could really talk about and start a conversation in. And the way we made the format was kind of like, given the sports reference show, like the sports show Pardon the Interruption, where they talk about the many different biggest news in the sports world. And then they do kind of like different games and stuff involving the sports stuff. And so we were like, okay, let's do something like that. And then, but make it more for movies. And so as we started working everything, and so I was hoping to get that started at the beginning of 2020.
Right.
But we were still a little behind on getting things ready. But then the pandemic happened. And then, and I was thinking maybe we should wait until the pandemic over before we get started. But then Adi's like, no. This is something we need to do now because this is where people are going to listen to y'all the most.
Yeah.
Is to get that started. And I was like, you know what? Let's do it. And lo and behold, so we changed the format. And and we're still doing it now. And it's definitely flourishing. I think me and Steven are definitely creating ourselves an identity on the show. And it's fun. It's a lot of fun. And that's the thing we would like to do is to have fun. Sometimes, we could get serious. Sometimes we get crazy. And I think I think for the most part, we do have a good balance of that. And I think that's what makes the show really good. And plus just talk about films in general. It's just, it's just a lot of fun. And that's where we're at right now.
Yeah. It's funny, like the show, because I was a guest on the show when it was still with Addy and Real Movie News and Reviews. You let me beg and plead until you said yes for me to come on and talk about Detective Pikachu, which I was very appreciative of. And I've been on a few times in Real Movie when it evolved into the Real Movie Critic versus the Cine-Guy. And what I love about both shows is that the shows always showcase the people on it. Like at the end of the day, the show is about the two of you. And like even though you and Steven curate these personas on the show that are at each other's throats, that don't like each other. It's very clear that there's love in that room, and I think it makes it more fun. I think being able to do you have to know the person you're recording with in order to do a show with them, right? Like even with Addy only being an acquaintance, you had a sense of his character before you said yes, and that made it easier. I was friends with all of my co-hosts on all the other shows on the network. I'd known some of those folks longer than others, but in order to jump into a conversation, you have to get a sense of the character and know how well it works. And going back to your tagline, Real Movie Reviews for Ordinary People, what I love about that is, first of all, this idea that any of us are ordinary, when I like to think that we're all weird, except rich white folk. They're all boring. But barring them, the rest of us are weird. But what I like about that tagline is, I like my fair share of video essays. I watch Patrick H. Willems. I watch Movies with Mikey. Like all of these folks who like to deep dive and analyze. But I also like other folks who do 5-minute reviews. I love what you and Steven both do because it's more accessible at a it's not a low comprehension level, but just at like a glance. You don't have to have a film degree. You don't have to have a vast knowledge of these genres to get something out of these reviews. And what I love about how you break them down on the website is that you lay out information and mostly let people make their own choice. You'll talk about what you like, but you rarely go, this movie sucks, because there's no value in that. And because someone else is just going to go, well, okay, I didn't learn anything. You actually spell out what you did and didn't like so people can take the information you provide and then move on. Was that always the idea for these reviews, especially the written ones? Did you always want to kind of lay it out frankly like that?
Oh, yes. I think that's the way to go, obviously. Everything is really, bottom line, it is your own opinion. Okay. Right. And so you don't have to agree with me. That's the thing, that's what makes us all unique and different, because we all have our different tastes, our different reasons. And so, I love Avengers Endgame, but I know there's some people who didn't, which I still think they're crazy, but I understand, but you got to give reasons too. You could just say, I hate it and that's it. That doesn't make any sense, at all. And yes, I would like to add a little passion to it, but not be too passionate. I don't want to end up like Stephen A. Smith or something like that, But, just make it something more relatable, Yeah. And that's one of the reasons why we like to do all different kinds of films, because that could relate to somebody, of course. But we do to draw a line on horror films. But even then, once in a while, we sneak something in, and unfortunately that's what started the whole Pennywise craze for Steven. But that's what we try to do, is try to get films that people can relate to. All right, and that's what we do.
Yeah, I mean, and what I also like about that is, like, when I came on, the most recent time I had come on the show, it was because I wanted to talk about Palm Springs, because I'd fell in love with the movie. And, you were like, sure, of course you can come on, but then you have to watch these other two movies, and gave me homework. One of which I ended up really loving, which was the Eurovision movie, which was really ridiculous, but was a lot of fun. And then, Greyhound, which wasn't a bad movie. It just wasn't something I was really into, but of course the performances were great. But what's really interesting about how you structure the show that way is you allowed me to come on to talk about the thing I wanted to talk about, but also gave me other things to watch to go outside my comfort zone, because I would have never watched Greyhound on my own. I like Tom Hanks and I like dramas, but I don't watch a ton of his stuff lately. I just haven't been super interested in it. But it allowed, and I ended up finding things I liked about that movie when we talked about it. And I also appreciate that you're one of the few people that I can vehemently disagree with and still have a civil conversation with. One of the things I hate about the internet, and I'm curious how you interact with this, because you must see it too, most people just want to hate shit on the internet. They don't want to give you a detailed discussion. They don't want to talk about it. They just want to say you're dumb and this thing sucks. And it drives me crazy. And what I appreciate about you as a critic is that you want to have conversations. You don't want to just shut people out. How do you battle against that kind of internet negativity and keep the conversation not only just intelligent and coherent, but, warm and inviting?
The key word there, respect.
Yes.
You got to have respect for people, respect their opinions. It is their right to say what they want. All right. That's that's the biggest thing, and so sometimes and that's why I try to be like, if somebody says I don't like it, it sucks. I'll if I want to, I'll protrude and be like, why? Please, just tell me why. Mm-hmm. And when they go and tell me why, I'm like, okay, I could see why you say that. Totally. And usually when I say these type of things, the people realize that, okay, this person actually really cares, in what I say. Now, I'll be quite honest, especially when it comes to social media, there are people I do avoid.
Of course.
Because I know that A, they're really stubborn, and B, they have no respect as well. And those are the two biggest things. And so no matter what you say to them, it's not. And bottom line is, I'm not here to change people's opinions.
Right.
I'm not here for that, But I do want to hear what people got to say. Sure. That's my main thing is, what do you got to say? Why do you disagree with me? Okay, you could disagree with me. That's fine.
Yeah.
All right, that's life. But we're living in an age where when you disagree, we're like enemies. It doesn't have to be that way.
Yeah.
But unfortunately, it is sometimes with everything.
Yeah, it makes it hard
crazy
to talk about movies on the internet. Like, there are a few things that you are the enemy if you don't agree with, like basic human rights and equal rights and those kinds of things. But like beyond that, especially when talking about movies, it's like people cannot like what you like. It's okay. You're allowed to disagree. And like my favorite story that I've told a few times on several podcasts is I loved our conversations about Robert Pattinson when he first got picked for Batman, because you were so focused on him in Twilight and like, he's not a good actor. I don't like this movie. He's not going to be good for this role. And I had seen him in other things, and I was arguing why I thought he would be good. And we never agreed. You didn't think he would be good. I did think, and we're still waiting to see. We've seen a trailer, and it's looking good. But like, I love that we were able to argue. I was able to tell you why I think he was good for the role, and you were able to tell me why you didn't think he was, and we were still friends, and we still talked about it, and we kept talking about it as new stuff came up. And I appreciate that, because it's so easy for someone to just be like, nah, he sucks and I'm done. And I appreciate, going back to you talking about respect, you respect my opinion, and I appreciate that, because conversations about movies are more fun if everyone's involved and everyone gets to say their piece and have a discussion. It's the minute you cut that off at the tail and you also don't listen, that then it just gets drowned out, and there are certain people you can't talk with on the internet. You're absolutely right. But I love that you and I are able to have those kinds of conversations. And it's what keeps bringing me back to Real Movie Critic versus the Cine-Guy. I want to talk a little bit about the early days of your blog and getting into movie reviews. So you said you've always liked movies. You've always been a big movie watcher since you were younger, and that you started the blog after you outgrew writing sentences on Facebook. So I'm curious, how early on did you think, like, have you always thought about movies critically? When you were younger, did you come out of certain movies and just be like, I wonder why they did that? Like, were you always curious about movies and like what went into them and that kind of thing?
I always enjoyed watching films, even as a kid. It's funny to me because growing up, even though I like watching a lot of films, my parents always tried to make me stop watching too much, because they think I'm watching too many movies, Right. And it's funny because even as a kid, I'd always sneak in and watch like PG-13 movies, even though I wasn't 13 yet, or even some R-rated films as well. and of course, when my parents find out, they get mad at me, but then we all get over it. But but then, it's funny because I never thought I would be a movie critic at all. I always thought I was going to be some type of sports writer. If you would have asked people back in my high school days, even my middle school days, what do you think I'm going to be? People will say, oh, this guy is going to be somewhere in the realm of sports, because that's my other passion too. And yeah, it was something that my parents kind of like, okay, we're good with that, And of course, growing up, I also played in sports too. Especially in high school, where I played varsity soccer and basketball, and yeah, it even in college, people wouldn't say too much, saying that, oh yeah, this guy really enjoys movies. But the spark came back when I started working in a movie theater.
That'll do it.
And that was in college. That was my last 2 years in college. I worked in a movie theater. Of course, the privilege you get is free movies.
Yeah, totally.
and so that gave me the itch to really be like, you know what? I love doing this. I love going out, taking some friends with me. Let's go watch it. Even if the movie sucked, hey, we didn't pay for it, so hey, we could really talk about this film, like how I say, with a level head and all that, and yeah, and people be asking me in college, it's like, hey, is this movie worth going to? And I'd be like, no, it's not. I wouldn't waste your money on it, Or yeah, no, definitely check it out. And it's funny that the summertime I worked there, I pretty much had nothing to do. So before and even after work, I just watched films. And it got to a point where I was watching the bottom of the barrel films. And, I didn't care. I didn't pay for it. And I didn't have anything else to do. So yeah, I just watched films. And yeah, I even tell people, hey, this film is actually good. You need to check this out. Movies that people haven't even heard of.
Sure.
And so that sparked another interest in me. Then and I went to grad school in Miami. Kind of had a decline. I hadn't watched films a lot during that time. But when I moved back to Boston, the theaters had like this thing where we got, okay, every Tuesday you could watch films for $5. Bargain.
Yeah.
Every Tuesday I was in there, and watching one or two movies. And yes, I don't condone this, but I used to do the 2-for-1 specials, I mean, who hasn't done it? But
sure.
Still, I don't condone it, but I used to do that, to try to get everything that I want. And that's when I started writing the blurbs on Facebook. And that's where everything just started going from there.
Yeah, I think what's really fascinating about, you're talking about going to the theater. I'm like, oh yeah, I remember movie theaters because that's not really a thing we can do right now. But there's something so important to me about watching certain movies in the theater. Like I've said to death that the movie Avatar is not a perfect film. I don't even know if I'd say it's a good film. I like James Cameron, but seeing that in IMAX, in the theater, on opening night, in 3D, I remember when the camera spins in the very beginning of the movie, they're showing the main character and the camera spins. Watching that in IMAX 3D, I got motion sick because it looked so real. That kind of thing that movies can do, and the at-home experience can give those kinds of experiences, but nothing is like watching spectacle movies in the theater. I like watching Marvel films, but I don't watch them at home much because there was something about seeing Endgame in the theater.
Yes.
And I will still avoid spoilers, even though I have no reason to have to. But the ending moments of that movie had me in tears because I'm surrounded by people feeling the same thing.
Yes.
And that's some of my favorite stuff about movies is that kind of shared emotion.
Exactly. That's an experience. That's for sure. And that's why I'm always there first day, even though people's like, why? It's too crowded, that's and that. And I was like, y'all don't understand, when you go into a film that's groundbreaking, like Endgame or Avatar, or even Star Wars too,
Yeah.
You're there with people that you relate, and it's like a family coming together almost,
Yeah.
So it's definitely like that. That's for sure.
I wanted to talk a little bit about sports because I know you're big into sports. And I will admit, though I do casually like sports, I haven't watched basketball or football, my two preferred sports, in a while. It's mostly because I'm a Bulls and a Giants fan, and so what's the point? Why bother watching at this point? Yeah, exactly. Won't stop me from giving Knicks fans shit, though, because I feel like I still have the edge on that.
They're Nets fans all of a sudden.
Exactly, right? The Brooklyn Nets. I remember when they were from New Jersey.
Yeah.
I'm curious, because there's a lot of crossover between sports and movies. There are tons of great and not great sports movies. Do you have a favorite sports movie? Do you like sports movies, or is that?
Oh yes.
It's a good meld of the things that you enjoy.
Oh yes, it's one of my favorite genres. For sure. Now, I'll be quite honest. Sports movies tend to be very formulaic. It's almost like the same movie all the time, but at least it's something that really happened, so I can't hate on it too much. Like I'm a coach as well, and I would love for like a moment to happen and see it in the theater, even though we've seen that movie who knows how many times, but I would like to see that. See who gets to play me. I guess that's a better Jack Black probably, but we'll see. But yeah, no, but one of my favorite sports movies, because not only is it a sports movie, but it also ties in with like racial equality and stuff like that. That is Remember the Titans.
Of course. Classic.
Yes. And I did talk about that back when it was called Dole Whips and Dreams with Maddie Limbrick. I know Maddie Limbrick. Mm-hmm. And we actually had a great conversation with that. But I do enjoy seeing sports movies it's a sport that we don't see often. Mm-hmm. I'll give you one example. The title escapes me, but it's a movie about ski jumping.
Oh, okay.
Yes, and it was fascinating to me because not only I learned about the sport, which is something I always enjoy, and B, it's something different. Mm-hmm. I can't remember the name, but Taron Egerton was the guy who was the ski jumper.
Okay.
Something Fly Eddie Fly or something like that, or Eddie the Eagle, something like that. It's around that realm.
The internet is yelling at us the title.
Yes, I know. I tend to have dementia sometimes, so I'm getting old. But yeah, no, it's but another type of film that I really, really enjoy, even though it's corny, but I still love it, is Space Jam.
Oh, I love Space Jam.
Yes.
It's funny because you were on Let's Rewatch. You and Steven were both on Let's Rewatch to talk about that movie. And anyone who's listened to one episode of Screen Stark knows how much Rachel and I love that movie. We're living in a time where, as of when we're recording this, there is like a 2-second clip of Space Jam 2, the new one with LeBron. In the HBO ad for all the movies they're getting. And I'm very excited about that. But yeah, Space Jam is one of those movies, and I wanted to ask you about this because I was curious, because I know you're a big music fan also. You listen to a lot of different kinds of music. Space Jam is one of my favorite movies because barring the big hit from that we don't talk about anymore because the guy turned into a douchebag. Which was a good song too, which is what really makes me angry because it makes it worse.
Same here.
But the rest of that soundtrack is so flawless. And I think it's what makes that movie good. Like, the movie's a good, fun movie, but I think it's the way they use the soundtrack in that movie, how they build up the characters. Like, I love that movie. I think it's also... Actually, this is what I want to ask you about Space Jam. Because for me, the reason Space Jam is so great still to me is because I grew up in the era of Michael Jordan. Like, he was why I was a Bulls fan. I will completely admit. Like, I loved the Bulls. I also loved Scottie Pippen and Purdue and, like, all the other folks on that team. But, like, he was so charismatic. He made me a fan. And so that movie is such a time capsule of basketball at that time with Muggsy Bogues and with, not Shaquille O'Neal, with Charles Barkley and Patrick Ewing. Barkley. Like,
yes.
For me... That's what made that movie good, is because I was a basketball fan, and it's very basketball. Is that how you feel about it too?
Yeah, and not only that, I was a big fan of the Looney Tunes.
Sure, of course.
Who isn't? That was the biggest thing. I grew up with the Looney Tunes as well, and I remember as a kid, I was like, Jordan and Bugs Bunny playing basketball? I want to see this.
Yeah, right.
And it's a fun movie. Yeah, people say, it's got the 90s cheese, but I don't care. This is my time as a kid. All right, this is my childhood. It's still nostalgic when I watch it.
For sure.
And I hope the sequel lives up to it, but we'll see. But I'm not holding my breath. But.
Yeah, we'll see how that goes. Like, I think what makes Space Jam great for folks that are our age, because we're around the same age, is the scene where they're going to get Jordan's basketball shorts from his house, Bugs and Daffy, and the kids see them and they talk to the kids. That magic of that moment is like, I felt like those kids because I was like, if I met them when I was a kid, I'd be the same way. Like, it was just kind of really magical in that moment.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah, for sure. Did you know that one of those kids actually is an NBA star now?
Really? That's amazing.
Eric Gordon.
I love that.
Eric Gordon.
That's awesome. That's really cool. I did not know that. Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah, no, for sure.
So let's talk a little bit about new movies because we're still living in a pandemic time. There is a way to see movies now, especially because of HBO. You guys will be able to watch a lot of new movies without leaving your house.
Oh, thank goodness.
But I'm curious what the future, like, what do you think the future of movies is? Because there were a lot of people predicting that the theaters wouldn't recover like a year ago. And now it's been a year and there's still no end in sight to COVID at the current moment. Even though we have the vaccine, we're still not sure where that's going. Do you have faith that the movie theaters will be able to recoup and keep doing it? Or do you think we're going to see maybe a rise of indie theaters because the big corporations aren't going to be able to stay afloat?
That's a good question. That's a very good question. But I do believe that theaters will come back. I do believe that in the long run. As long as we still got making films of Marvel and Star Wars and things that actually bring in money, they'll be okay. They'll be okay because those are the ones that sell. They're not necessarily the greatest movies, but they're the ones that sell. But as you said about the indie theaters and stuff like that, I think they might make a rise too. Especially if the big theaters are still closed and those are open. People might say, "Hey, let's try it out." And the problem with indie films, though, is that they don't advertise very well. Sometimes you don't hear about it until you hear the Oscar nominations and stuff like that. But I urge people to give those a chance because you might find some great films in that regard. Especially now that I know people that are working on these type of indie films. I want to go and support them too.
For sure.
And things, but in the end, I do believe that they'll come back, especially the big theater chains like AMC, which I love using their A-list pass. That helps you save money on watching some of these films. So thank goodness for that.
Yeah,
and even back then with Movie Pass, that helped me save money too, even though that didn't last too long.
Sure did not. That thing crashed and burned.
Yes, it did. But so yeah, I think that probably some of the smaller theater company chains they might lose, but I do think that once the crowds come back, and it probably not going to be this year. I would say 2022. In my personal opinion, I think
I agree.
That's
completely.
when it gets back to normal. But you know what? In this pandemic, you know what I did for the first time?
What's that?
I went to a drive-in.
Oh, yes. I heard that there were tons of drive-ins that opened up where you go, wear a mask and go in your car. And like, you can just sit in your car the whole time. You don't have to get out or interact with people. That's really cool. Yeah. I've still never been to a drive-in movie, but that sounds like it'd be a lot of fun.
And of course I've done it alone, but I think it would be a lot more fun with people with the car with you. And I did a drive-in for the first time. And at first it was too weird. But, because I live in California where everything is shut down. So,
yeah.
But when I found out the drive-ins were actually showing like the latest films, I was like, you know what? I'm going to give this a try. And really for the sake of the show too, I was going to, and not only that, it's affordable. It's not like a $20 ticket. And even the concession stands are very cheap as well. And not only that, you could bring food with you without people giving you a bad eye as well. So, there was a Taco Bell close by. I just get some Taco Bell and go into the drive-in, and I'm good to go.
Look, I'm not saying that I snuck food into the theaters, but I'm not saying that I snuck food into the theaters. That's all I'm saying.
I can honestly say I haven't done that.
Really?
Yes.
Backpack life in Manhattan. It's like, oh, it's my backpack. I just came from work. I got, there's nothing in there. Don't worry about it.
Yeah, no. I always go in well fed before I watch a movie. So.
Good plan.
Yes. And so, drive-ins, it's fun. It's once you get used to it, you're like just sitting back in your car and using your car stereo system, which I hope is good, and just watch the film like it's no other. And I try to get there early so I could get a good spot too.
Right.
To watch that. And but the drive-in I go to, how can I say this? It's interesting because let's just put it this way. Just a quick story. The first time I got there, and I got there a little late to watch this film, And when I opened my car window, all I smelled was pure marijuana.
Oh,
Or
jeez.
weed. And I was like, oh, okay, I'm in this type of place. Okay. And then right before the film starts, somebody knocks on my window. And I just opened it a little bit. I was like, yes. They're like, oh, would you mind turning up your radio a little bit so we could listen? Because our radio's not working too well. And I was like, sure, why not? I'm a nice guy, bottom line.
Sure.
And then, the people were like, oh, thank you. You're so kind. Would you like a shot? And I'm like, no, I don't drink. I'm good. But thank you. But yeah, it's an experience. It definitely is.
It sounds like it. I'm a little curious since 2021 is the first year in movies where we really have kind of a giant question mark. Like 2020 was a weird year. We had no Marvel movies. The first time in a decade we had no Marvel movies. We had, a lot of the other franchise stuff too. No Star Wars movie. A lot of stuff got shut down. Things are starting to ramp up. They're trying to figure out how to film safely. But HBO did announce that on HBO Max, all of the Warner Brothers movies are all going to be on HBO Max at the same time they're in the theaters for those places that can go to theaters. And then other studios as well have announced that they are slowly going to roll out movies again. Disney has made some announcements that their movies are going to start to come out again. Do you have an anticipated movie of 2021? Is there one movie that you're really looking forward to besides Space Jam Legacy? Because we know that's the one you're looking forward to the most. But besides that one, is there a movie that you're really excited about?
I'm looking forward to Black Widow. That's
a good one.
My number one.
Yeah.
And I'm a big Marvel fan. I do believe this film is going to tie up all the things that happened from before, and I think it's going to be fun. And I think it'll be a good end to that character, and then start the new something new. I'm not sure if the I forgot what's the other film that's supposed to be after that. I think it's Shang-Chi, which I believe. I'm not sure it's coming out in 2021. I'm not sure, but I believe that might be the next Black Panther.
I mean, it has the potential to be. It's really exciting. It's an all Asian cast, and I grew up reading and watching Iron Man, the cartoon, and so I love the Mandarin. I know the Mandarin was born out of a racist caricature, and they evolved him the best they could in the comics, but I get why the Mandarin was what he was in Iron Man 3. It makes sense now that I'm older because they couldn't have done it unless they did it right. They couldn't have done it. So instead they made it a joke, which made it easier to swallow this kind of terrorist character. But the fact that they've announced that the real Mandarin is going to be in Shang-Chi, I'm really excited to see how they tackle that character to not make it a racist stereotype, to make it an interesting character,
Yes. For sure. Marvel's too smart for that. They make the right changes. That's for sure. They do. And so, like I said, I'm not sure Shang-Chi is coming out. I think it is. I'm almost certain it is, but don't quote me. At least we got the television series too, and we're starting to watch WandaVision too. I'm not going to say any spoilers, but it's very interesting.
It is.
And so we're going to get those at least. So we got something,
Totally.
And I'm just glad that Disney Plus is doing kind of like the same thing as HBO Max is doing. Although I just read that Raya and the Last Dragon, you could watch it in theaters or pay for it at Disney Plus. I thought that was going to be on Disney Plus, but I guess they're doing the Mulan route with that.
It sounds like
I hope it's not $30, but for me to enjoy Mulan, watch it with the whole family.
Yeah.
That makes it worth it.
Yeah.
And that's what I kind of did.
I still haven't seen it. I've heard bad things. I
liked it, but I get it.
Yeah. I mean,
I get it.
It makes sense why people didn't like it. It bums me out because I love the original so much. But that said, I am looking forward. You mentioned Raya and the Last Dragon, and I'm really looking forward to that because it looks like it's taking the same kind of care that Moana did to represent a culture and to cast appropriately, and it looks like it's just going to be very good. Also, I'm a sucker for any large, round, cute animal character, so I'm easy to win over that way. But yeah, I mean, it honestly doesn't surprise me that you say Black Widow, only because knowing you and also being a Marvel fan myself, Black Widow has an opportunity to wrap up that character in a way, and I have a theory that it's going to introduce us to a new Black Widow, since Black Widow is a title as well as a character.
True.
But that said, it'll be interesting to see how it ties to Endgame, just because it is a prequel. And so, it's funny. People want to theorize, and they don't think Marvel can do it. Like, Marvel's never really let us down, because even their stinkers aren't really stinkers. I will argue that, well, Thor 2 is not a great movie, but it is not a bad movie. It is a fine action film. They wasted Christopher Eccleston as Malekith. Like, you had a great character and a great actor, and misused him completely. But it's still not a terrible movie, And so, I'm also excited for Black Widow. I think that I'm interested to see where they're going, because I don't believe for a minute that Endgame was always the plan. I think halfway through they were like, "Oh, these things will work well together," and that they leaned into it. But now they are absolutely planning for the future, and so I'm curious to see what the next stuff is, because they've made such huge announcements already. Like Kang the Conqueror is going to be in Ant-Man 3, which is humongous.
Yes.
It's interesting with the Marvel films. Do you think we're ever going to get oversaturated? Because people have been worried about that, and now with the Disney Plus series, do you think it's going to be too much? Or do you think that they'll be able to manage it in a way that'll still be entertaining?
Here's why I don't think so, all right?
Okay.
Because I do think the people that do watch these films are fans of Marvel regardless of the comics, the cartoons back in the day. That's why I think people do want more. I think for the average people, they might say that. And I think those are the people that do say that, And I'm like, well, that's your choice, If you think it's too much, then okay, don't watch it. That's your choice.
Sure.
And things, you could say the same thing for Star Wars too.
Totally.
And that too. And I always consider myself the casual Star Wars fan. I'm not oversaturated in fandom like other people, and another thing too that I would say, I hope DC actually does make good movies.
Me too.
As well.
I've said it 1,000 times. I didn't want Justice League to be bad. It was, but I didn't want it to be. And like, even with the Zack Snyder, Snyder cut, whatever nonsense, like, I sigh a heavy sigh like everybody else. But that said, if it comes out and it's good, I will be ecstatic, because I don't want to hate these movies. I genuinely thought Man of Steel was okay. I hated Batman vs. Superman, and I hated Justice League. I loved Aquaman, I loved Shazam, and I loved Wonder Woman. Like, they're not all misses, but like, I liked Henry Cavill's Superman. He wasn't perfect, but I liked him. Yes, me too. I didn't mind Ben Affleck's Batman either. I think
he was fine.
I think the casting is good. I just think that they need to I think Shazam is the best example of what they need to do, because Shazam also, while a kid's film, still had adult moments, had dark moments. I just think that is the example of what DC needs to do. Wonder Woman, the first Wonder Woman, also, besides the third act, that whole movie is so good. And even Wonder Woman 84, I'd argue, if you put it in the mind frame of a Christopher Reeve Superman, an 80s Superman movie, like, it's an 80s movie. It's cheesy and ridiculous, but it's still fun. I had a good time. It was the year of Pedro Pascal. I already loved him as the Mandalorian and so many other things, but to see him as Maxwell Lord, and instead of playing this character as like, he's often portrayed in other media is very much like a Lex Luthor, like very maniacal and serious. And he wasn't. He was the goofball and the salesperson, and it was so well done. Like, I agree with you. I want DC to do more and be better, because when they get it right, it's really good also. And like, I don't care what anybody says, Aquaman is fun. You could say it's not good. It's a fun movie.
Funny thing about that is, comic-wise, I'm the biggest Aquaman hater that you'll ever see. Like, I really think he's just a lame superhero. And I know some people are going to start throwing shoes at me, but they know. People know, they know. But they thought I was going to hate the movie. But I watched the movie, and I was like, it's not bad. I like the world that it created. You know, kind of like with Black Panther. I love the world that they created. And the same with Aquaman, you know. There is a difference between comics and films, which I know a lot of these fans don't get.
Yeah, totally. It can't be identical.
Yeah, exactly. And so, if you have that understanding, you'll enjoy these films a lot better. That's for sure.
I mean, also, when you cast Julie Andrews as a Kraken, and when you cast Patrick Wilson as Ocean Master, see, my thing about Patrick Wilson, who I've been very lucky to meet, he's a lovely person, is that he is best when he's playing big. If he can be over the top, he is at his best because he chews the scenery so well. And like to watch him as Ocean Master, who is essentially like, you know, an old school black and white cartoon villain, like twirling his mustache effectively. He was great. He was great. Yeah. I agree with you completely, Hans. I think, you know, and it's hard because I also hated Wolverine Origins because it was a bad movie, but also because I love Wolverine. He's one of my favorite characters, and I love the comics. But that said, I liked the Wolverine. I thought it was fine, and I loved Logan. Logan is one of the best comic book movies that I don't know if I ever need to watch again because it's too sad. But it's so good. Like, I'm excited to see what they do with this stuff. I'm always excited when indie movies get stuff. Like, I'm excited about talking about comic books. Robert Kirkman's other series besides The Walking Dead, Invincible, is getting a cartoon that is being made by Robert Kirkman. He's the showrunner. The animator is the same person who drew the comics. Like, that's exciting to see people transcend media. Just like the Old Guard, the creator of that graphic novel, got to write and make that movie. Like, I want to see more of that because I think these people know that it can't translate directly, and they'll do what it takes to make it translate.
Yeah. Bottom line for DC, this might sound harsh, but Warner Bros. Need to back off and get people who not only knows about it, but loves the characters and find their Feige, you know, as I would say, Kevin Feige. But Warner Bros. Needs to back off because I think when they meddle in this stuff, that's where things get bad, unfortunately.
I would agree. Totally. That's why I'm excited about James Gunn's Suicide Squad also. Yes. Because James Gunn is a director who usually gets to do what he wants. And like just the character trailer we saw looks great. That was another one. Birds of Prey, I forgot to mention, was a phenomenal movie because they let them do something with it. It wasn't just... You know, I still haven't seen the first Suicide Squad movie, but I feel like I don't need to. I think I've heard enough from the internet.
It's true. It's the first 2/3 are good. It's just the last part is where it gets questionable. But you know, I was enjoying it at the beginning.
Sure.
You know, it's just unfortunate when they can't stick the landings, and that's a lot of films. So
totally. Well, we've been talking a lot about movie adaptations, and before we wrap up, I would love to ask. You know, you've watched a lot of TV over your life and read books and read comics. And is there something that's not been adapted to film that you would really love to see a film version of? Is there something you can think of that like you've read or watched on TV or played a video game of that you've wanted to see adapted well?
Oh, man. It seems like the ones I'm thinking about are actually happening.
That's true.
I'll give you one example. Metal Gear Solid, one of my favorite video games, is actually happening. You know,
and the fact that they're casting Oscar Isaac as Snake, like I would want David Hayter. Yeah. I want David Hayter because David Hayter's been the voice, but I think Oscar Isaacs can do a really good job. And Uncharted with Tom Holland playing a young Nathan Drake, I think that's brilliant. Also, it's exciting. Well, and I know you're excited about the new Mortal Kombat. I'm sure you've got your hope.
Yes, I hope they get it right. I really do that. I hope they get it right.
I'm really excited because a good friend of mine, Josh Lawson, who is an actor and who's from Australia, is playing Kano in the movie. And like the minute I saw that, I was like, oh, they got a really great actor who's Australian to play this Aussie douchebag, Kano. That immediately made me excited. You know, I'm a little sad that there's no Christopher Lambert Raiden. I loved his Raiden, but that said. But that said, I am excited about that one too, especially because of what they can do with special effects now versus what they did in the 90s, you know?
Exactly. And I just hope to give Scorpion justice. That's all I ask for. So that's all. But another thing that I do want to see happen, and it's not necessarily from something, you know, me being a Latino, you know, I really want to see films that really talks more about our culture.
Sure.
You know, and we already got some. You know, we got Coco.
You did get Coco, yeah, which is
and
great.
that was great. You know, it even though me personally, I don't believe in the land of the dead or whatever, you know,
Right.
but it is a huge thing in the Mexican culture. And I'm excited too when Disney announced the film Encanto. I got really excited, you know, because they're doing something from South America now, which is a different, you know, Latinos come in all different shapes and sizes and
Sure.
beliefs and whatnot. And yeah, and I am dying, and it's kind of happening, but I am dying to see a superhero movie with a Latino.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, like we got close with, you know, because Miles Morales is part Latino. But,
Yes.
you know, I get that. You know, I am, as a white man, have no question of representation as it's everywhere. I can go fuck myself. But like, no, I agree with you. I think everything that we've seen, and as that continues to expand, I think we're just eventually going to get there. And there are Latino superheroes, and there's a ton of stuff to mine for that. And I think that the bigger these things get, and the more Latinos that are behind the camera, and the more Latinos who are writing these movies too, will allow that to happen. And that's a shift that we're seeing,
Exactly.
much slower than I would even like. But I think that's a beautiful way
It's
to
getting
wrap
there.
up the show. I think I agree. I completely agree.
And we're patient people, so we're waiting for it. So, you know, we're just waiting. You know, that's how it is. But no, I think there is a lot of great Latino actors as of right now. You know, you already mentioned Pedro Pascal, Oscar Isaac, who's Guatemalan like me, so it's definitely a big deal for me. And so it's something that we could get excited about. And I know, kind of like with Black Panther, and as I predicted with Shang-Chi, I think when we got something like that, it's going to get hugely supported as well. True. And it's going to make money, you know, that will make everybody happy. You know, I hate to say that, but it's true. But
Well, yeah, Black
and that's the
Panther
thing.
proved that the marketing execs who said people won't come out to see this, it's wrong. It's not true anymore. You can point to a major blockbuster and say this is incorrect, and people need to change their perspectives.
Exactly. And so, and I love watching films from other type of races because it helps me learn a lot of things.
Oh, hell yeah.
And things, you know, and especially I was raised with people from the Caribbean, like Jamaicans or Trinidadians, African Americans, especially in college too. And I always cherish those moments because I learn a lot, you know, about that and things. And it for me, it just shows that, hey, we may be different, but we're all the same.
Yeah.
You know, as long as we have love, we're good. We are good, you know. And that's one thing with my personal life, you know, it's just teaching about love, you know. I don't want to sound too religious too, but I'm sorry for that. But, you know, because it is important to me. But if we just show more of Christ's love instead of other things, the world would be a better place.
Look, I mean, regardless of religion, I think I can easily agree that love and kindness is important. I think we have to go beyond that. I think that unfortunately, so many people are being met with violence that love and kindness isn't an option. But I agree that we need more of global love and kindness, which just doesn't exist right now, and it's part of the problem.
Yeah, any type of love is something.
Yeah.
You know.
Totally.
And yeah, you're right. We need that.
Well, Hans, thank you so much for coming on the show. I'm really excited to have you on. I appreciate you asking. And, you know, I really do love everything you're doing and everything you're working on. I urge everybody to check out your stuff. Before I have you do our sign off for the show, can you please tell folks where they can find your movie reviews, the podcast, you on social media? Like, do your plugs.
All right. Well, for our show, The Real Movie Critic versus Cine-Guy, you can definitely find us at CertainPOV.com. We're the only title page with our faces on it, so we can't miss it. You can't miss it. And yeah, and whatever you listen to your podcast, you can find it. You know, whether it's on iTunes or Spotify, you can find us. As far as for myself, you can find my blog at realmoviecritic.com. and they're quick reads too. It's not an essay. I promise you that. They're quick reads, so you could just go ahead and check it out. Also on my social media, yes, I still use Facebook. You can find me there at Real Movie Critic, or you could also follow me on Twitter and Instagram at Real Critic 34, and that's about it.
Amazing. Hans, thank you again for taking the time. I feel
thanks
like
for
you know
having me.
what to do here at the end. You've listened to enough episodes. Please help me wrap up the first episode of Certain POV Autographs by saying our catchphrase, music is life and life is good.
Music is life, and life is good.
That's it for this episode of CPOV Autographs. Our theme music is by Michael Kill. Our logo was designed by Case Aiken and Joey Amons. If you liked the show, please rate and review wherever you get your podcasts. It's a great way to help us reach more listeners. Questions, comments, or guest recommendations? Email mr.matt.storm@gmail.com or hit us up on Twitter at CPOV Autographs. Thank you so much for listening.
Hello, my name is Hans Martin Jr., your Real Movie Critic. If you enjoy discussing upcoming movie news, looking at new trailers, and reviewing the year's hottest movies, then tune in to...
Hey, Hans!
What?
Are you doing the promo without me?
Yeah, I am.
How come?
Because everyone knows I'm the better host of this podcast.
Oh, it's like that, huh? You think you can review movies better than me?
I don't think I can. I know.
Oh, we'll see about that. This is
The Real Movie Critic.
versus the Cine-Guy. Mondays only at CertainPOV.com or wherever you listen to your podcast. We're also on Spotify and iTunes. You're going down, critic.
Bring it on, guy.
CPOV. CertainPOV.com.